A poor girl knocks on a millionaire's door in the middle of the night, completely drenched. Without hesitation, she says she is his daughter and that she has no one else in the world. When he hears the name of the girl's mother, the past he tried to forget comes crashing back with devastating force. But it is the request she makes, with a trembling voice and an open heart, that brings him to tears. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse overlooking Central Park, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. Richard Harrison stood motionless in his living room, a crystal tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand, watching the storm rage through the November night. At 42, he possessed everything money could buy: a real estate empire that spanned 3 states, luxury cars, expensive art, and a home that could grace the cover of any architectural magazine. Yet the vast apartment felt suffocatingly empty, filled only with the echoes of his own footsteps and the distant hum of the city that never slept. The sharp knock on his door cut through the silence like a blade. Richard frowned, glancing at the antique clock on the mantel. Nearly midnight. His doorman hadn't called to announce any visitors, and his assistant knew better than to disturb him at this hour without an emergency. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, accompanied by a sound that made his heart skip: the faint crying of a child. When he opened the heavy oak door, Richard's breath caught in his throat. Before him stood a little girl, no more than 7 years old, completely soaked from the storm. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and she clutched a small purple backpack against her chest as if it contained all her worldly possessions. Her large brown eyes, rimmed with tears and exhaustion, looked up at him with a mixture of hope and terror. "Are you Richard Harrison?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper, her small body trembling from cold and fear. Richard knelt to her level, his expensive suit forgotten as puddles formed on the marble floor beneath them. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. How did you get here? Where are your parents?" The child's lower lip quivered as she struggled to find her words. "My mommy told me to come find you if anything ever happened to her. She said you would take care of me." A chill ran down Richard's spine that had nothing to do with the November air rushing through the open door. "What's your name, little one?" "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Mitchell." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Mitchell. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging him back 8 years to a time when his heart had belonged completely to another person. Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had appeared in his life like sunshine breaking through storm clouds, only to vanish just as suddenly, leaving behind nothing but questions and an ache that had never fully healed. "Sarah Mitchell," he breathed, not realizing he had spoken aloud. Emma's eyes widened with recognition. "You knew my mommy?" Richard's hands shook as he reached out to touch the child's face, seeing Sarah's features reflected in every delicate line. The same expressive brown eyes, the same stubborn chin, even the same way of tilting her head when she was uncertain. "Yes, Emma, I knew your mother very well. Come inside, you're freezing." He scooped her up, surprised by how light she felt in his arms, and carried her into the warmth of the penthouse. As he wrapped her in one of his cashmere throws, Emma looked up at him with those impossibly familiar eyes. "Mommy went to heaven 3 days ago," she said with the matter-of-fact tone that children sometimes use when discussing incomprehensible tragedy. "There was an accident. Grandma Margaret got really sick and couldn't take care of me anymore, so she told me where to find you. She said you're my daddy." The words hit Richard with the force of a tsunami. His legs gave out and he sank onto the leather sofa. Beside her, his mind reeling. A daughter. He had a daughter. The child he and Sarah had dreamed about during those magical months when they had planned a future together before she had disappeared from his life without explanation. "Emma," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Tell me about your mom. What was she like?" For the next hour, as the storm continued to rage outside, Emma painted a picture of a life he had never known existed. Sarah working 2 jobs to support them, reading bedtime stories every night, making pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings, teaching Emma to be brave even when she was scared. With each detail, Richard felt a piece of his heart break for the years he had lost, the moments he would never get back. She always said you were the kindest man she ever knew, Emma continued, her eyelids growing heavy with exhaustion. She showed me your picture sometimes. She said you had a good heart, but that bad people wanted to hurt you, and she had to keep me safe. Richard's blood ran cold. Bad people. What had Sarah been running from? What danger had forced her to disappear with his child? His mind raced through the possibilities, thinking of business rivals, disgruntled employees, or competitors who might have threatened his family to get to him. As Emma finally fell asleep, curled up against his side, Richard stared down at her peaceful face, overwhelmed by a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. This tiny person was part of him, part of Sarah, a living bridge between his past and whatever future lay ahead. He gently carried her to his guest room, tucking her into the king-sized bed that seemed to swallow her small frame. It was then, as he was carefully removing her damp jacket, that he noticed the purple backpack she had refused to let go of during their entire conversation. His hands trembled as he unzipped it, revealing a collection of items that told the story of a childhood. A well-worn teddy bear, some crayons, a few pieces of clothing, and at the bottom, an envelope with his name written in Sarah's familiar handwriting. Richard's heart hammered as he opened the letter, his eyes scanning the pages of flowing script that brought Sarah's voice back to him across the years. The words painted, a picture of love, loss, and terrible fear that made his chest tighten with guilt and regret. "My dearest Rick," the letter began, "if Emma is reading this to you, then the worst has happened, and I am no longer able to protect her myself. I know you must have questions, and I know my leaving must have hurt you deeply. Please believe me when I say that every day I stayed away from you was agony, but I had no choice." The letter went on to explain how, shortly after their last night together, Sarah had begun receiving anonymous threats. Someone had learned about their relationship and was using it as leverage, threatening to destroy Richard's business empire and harm anyone close to him unless she disappeared completely. Terrified and pregnant with Emma, Sarah had made the agonizing decision to vanish, believing she was protecting both the man she loved and their unborn child. "I moved to Portland," the letter continued. "I changed my name, my job, everything about my life. I told Emma that her father was a wonderful man who couldn't be with us, but that he would love her if he knew she existed. I never stopped loving you, Rick, but I never dared to reach out, fearing that my presence would bring danger to your door." The letter revealed that Sarah had been battling illness for months, and in her final weeks, the threats had mysteriously stopped coming. She suspected that whoever had been tormenting her was no longer a threat, but by then, she was too weak to make the journey to New York herself. Her last act had been to prepare Emma for this moment, teaching her how to find her father and giving her the documentation that proved their connection. "In my old apartment in Portland," the letter concluded, "there are paternity test results and other documents that will confirm what I believe you already know in your heart. Emma is your daughter, Rick. She has your stubbornness, your intelligence, and your capacity for love. Please take care of our baby girl. She is the best part of both of us." Richard read the letter 3 times before it finally sank in. Sarah hadn't left because she had stopped loving him. She had sacrificed their happiness, their family, their future together to protect him and Emma from an unnamed threat. The knowledge was both devastating and healing, answering questions that had tormented him for 8 years, while opening wounds he had thought were healed. He looked in on Emma, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, her small hand curled around the teddy bear. In the morning he would call his lawyers, arrange for DNA testing, and begin the process of officially claiming his daughter. He would find out everything there was to know about Sarah's life in Portland and ensure that whoever had threatened her could never hurt Emma. But tonight he simply sat in the chair beside her bed, watching his daughter sleep and marveling at the miracle that had brought her to his door. The storm outside was beginning to calm, and for the first time in 8 years, Richard Harrison felt like he might be coming home to himself. As dawn approached, Emma stirred and opened her eyes, momentarily confused by her surroundings. When she saw Richard sitting beside her, her face broke into a shy smile that was pure Sarah. "Good morning, Daddy," she whispered. The word hit him like a lightning bolt, filling every empty space in his heart with light. "Good morning, sweetheart," he replied, reaching out to smooth her hair. "Are you hungry? I think we should have some breakfast and then figure out what comes next." Emma nodded eagerly, and as Richard helped her wash up and prepare for the day, he felt a transformation beginning deep within him. The man who had built an empire through ruthless determination was learning to move with the gentle patience required for a 7-year-old. The penthouse that had echoed with loneliness was already beginning to feel different, warmer somehow, filled with the possibility of laughter and life. Over breakfast, Emma told him more, stories about her life with Sarah, and Richard shared carefully chosen memories of his own childhood, painting pictures of the family they were going to become. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the entire week, explaining only that he had urgent family business to attend to. "Emma," he said as they finished their meal, "I want you to know that you're safe now. Whatever happens, whatever we discover about the past, I will never let anyone take you away from me. You're my daughter, and I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to." "Love anyone?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time since arriving at his door, they were tears of relief rather than fear. She threw her small arms around his neck, holding on as if she never intended to let go. "I love you too, Daddy," she whispered against his shoulder. "Mommy said you would make everything better." As Richard held his daughter close, feeling her heart beating against his chest, he made a silent promise to Sarah's memory and to the little girl in his arms. He would not only make everything better, he would build a life so full of love and security that Emma would never again know the fear and uncertainty that had brought her to his door on that stormy November night. 3 days later, as Richard was teaching Emma how to make his famous chocolate chip pancakes in the penthouse kitchen, the doorman's call interrupted their morning routine. 2 representatives from Child Services, accompanied by a family law attorney, were requesting to speak with him urgently. Richard's protective instincts flared immediately, but he forced himself to remain calm for Emma's sake. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart," he said softly, kneeling down to Emma's level. "These people are here to help us make everything official. Just tell them the truth about how you found me and how you've been feeling since you've been here." Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand finding his for comfort as they greeted their unexpected visitors. Ms. Patricia Coleman from Child Services, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, smiled warmly at Emma before addressing Richard with professional courtesy. "Mr. Harrison, we received a call from Margaret Mitchell in Portland. She expressed concern about her granddaughter's well-being and requested that we verify Emma's current living situation. We also have some documents that may interest you." The attorney, James Patterson, opened his briefcase and withdrew several official-looking papers. Before her passing, Sarah Mitchell prepared a detailed custody arrangement, naming you as Emma's preferred guardian, contingent upon verification of paternity. Mrs. Mitchell Sr. has provided us with initial documentation, but will need official DNA testing to proceed with legal guardianship. Richard felt a mixture of relief and apprehension wash over him. The legal system's involvement made everything feel more real, more permanent, but it also meant scrutiny of his fitness as a father and potential challenges to his claim. "Of course, I'll cooperate fully with whatever procedures you need. Emma is my daughter, and I want everything to be legally sound for her protection." Over the next several hours, they underwent interviews, home inspections, and preliminary screenings. Emma answered questions with the honest simplicity of childhood, describing how safe and happy she felt with Richard, how he made her favorite foods and read her bedtime stories, and how he had promised never to leave her alone again. Miss Coleman observed their interactions carefully, noting the genuine affection and natural comfort level between father and daughter. During the home inspection, Richard showed them Emma's room, which he had transformed from a sterile guest space into a child's haven complete with pastel walls, stuffed animals, and a reading nook by the window. Emma proudly demonstrated how she had helped choose the colors and arrange her few belongings alongside the new toys and books Richard had purchased. "He lets me help cook breakfast every morning," Emma told Ms. Coleman earnestly. "And he doesn't mind when I spill things because he says that's how we learn. Mommy used to say the same thing." 2 weeks later, armed with the legal documentation and emergency custody arrangements, Richard and Emma embarked on the journey that would change both their lives forever. The flight to Portland felt like traveling backward through time, each mile carrying them closer to the life Sarah had built without him. Emma pressed her face against the airplane window during takeoff, watching New York shrink below them, and Richard found himself holding his breath, terrified that somehow this journey might take his daughter away from him permanently. Margaret Mitchell met them at the airport, a frail woman in her 70s whose eyes immediately filled with tears upon seeing Emma. Despite her illness, she had insisted on personally showing them Sarah's home, wanting to ensure that Richard understood the magnitude of the sacrifice his daughter's mother had made for their safety. The drive through Portland's tree-lined streets felt surreal, each turn bringing them closer to answers that Richard both craved and feared. The modest apartment in southeast Portland stood in stark contrast to Richard's luxurious penthouse, but as they walked through the small rooms, he was struck by the warmth and love that radiated from every corner. Photographs documented Emma's entire life: first steps in the tiny living room, birthday parties with handmade decorations, bedtime, stories read in the cozy bedroom she had shared with her mother. A height chart marked on the kitchen doorframe showed Emma's growth over the years, each line dated in Sarah's familiar handwriting. In the living room, Richard discovered a bookshelf filled with novels he remembered Sarah loving, many of them books they had discussed during their time together. Tucked between the pages of her favorite poetry collection, he found pressed flowers from Central Park, souvenirs from their walks together that she had kept all these years. The discovery nearly brought him to his knees with the weight of what they had all lost. Emma moved through the apartment with the confidence of familiarity, showing Richard her small bedroom with its collection of hand-sewn dolls and the kitchen table where she had done her homework every night. "Mommy always made sure I had a quiet place to study," she explained, running her fingers over the worn wood surface. She said education was the most important gift she could give me. In Sarah's bedroom, Emma made a discovery that would prove crucial to their future. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard, she found a leather-bound journal that her mother had kept throughout the years of their separation. As Richard read the entries aloud, his voice occasionally breaking with emotion, a picture emerged of a woman who had never stopped loving him, but lived in constant fear of bringing danger to his door. The early entries spoke of sleepless nights spent wondering if she had made the right choice, of watching Emma's first words and steps alone, wishing Richard could share those precious moments. Sarah had documented every milestone, every funny phrase, every small triumph, as if creating a record she might someday share with him. Emma said "Dada" today, one entry. "Bet. I know she's just babbling, but my heart broke a little. She'll never know how much her father would have treasured hearing that word." The journal revealed troubling details about Sarah's final months. A distant relative, Thomas Mitchell, had begun visiting frequently, offering financial help and emotional support during her illness. Initially grateful for his kindness, Sarah had gradually become uncomfortable with his intense interest in Emma and his persistent questions about custody arrangements and inheritance issues. "He keeps asking about Emma's father," one entry read. "I've told him that Richard doesn't know about her, but Thomas seems obsessed with the idea that I'm hiding something valuable. Yesterday, he suggested that if something happened to me, he would be the natural choice to raise Emma. The way he talks about her future, about the opportunities he could provide, makes my skin crawl. There's something calculating in his eyes when he looks at her, like he's appraising a valuable asset rather than seeing a child." Margaret's voice was heavy with regret as she confirmed these concerns. Thomas had always been jealous of Sarah's independence. When he learned about Emma's paternity, I could see the dollar signs in his eyes. He knew about Richard's wealth from the business magazines and started calculating what claiming the child might be worth to him. He began pressuring Sarah to reveal Richard's identity, claiming he just wanted to ensure Emma would be provided for if something happened. The most disturbing entries came from Sarah's final weeks, describing how Thomas had become increasingly aggressive in his pursuit of information about Richard. He had hired a private investigator to research Richard's business empire and had begun making veiled threats about what might happen to Emma if Sarah continued to resist his involvement in custody planning. He brought "Legal documents today," Sarah had written in her final entry. "Papers that would give him guardianship if I sign them. He says it's just a precaution, but I know better. He's not doing this out of love for Emma. He sees her as a ticket to a fortune he thinks he deserves. I have to find the courage to contact Richard directly. It's time to risk everything rather than let Thomas destroy what little peace we've found." Back in New York, the DNA results arrived with official confirmation. Emma was undeniably Richard's biological daughter. The news transformed him completely, melting away the last vestiges of the cold businessman he had once been. He called an emergency board meeting and restructured his entire company, delegating most operational responsibilities to his trusted executives so he could focus on his daughter. His assistant, initially shocked by the dramatic change in her demanding boss, quickly adapted to scheduling around Emma's school events and doctor's appointments rather than business meetings and corporate dinners. He hired a nanny named Jessica Martinez, who specialized in helping children process grief and trauma, and devoted himself entirely to building a life centered around Emma's needs. Jessica, a warm Puerto Rican woman in her 30s with extensive experience in child psychology, quickly became an integral part of their family dynamic. Her gentle approach helped Emma process her mother's loss while encouraging her growing bond with Richard. However, Jessica noticed something troubling. Emma often seemed to carry a weight beyond her years, as if she were holding onto a secret that frightened her. During their therapy sessions, Emma would become withdrawn when discussing the period immediately before her mother's passing, changing the subject or claiming she couldn't remember details that should have been fresh in her young mind. For months, their new family routine provided healing and joy. Emma enrolled in one of Manhattan's finest private schools, where her teachers were amazed by her resilience and intelligence. She made friends quickly with children from similar backgrounds and slowly began opening up about her life with Sarah. Richard discovered the pure pleasure of homework assistance, attending parent-teacher conferences and weekend adventures in Central Park. He taught Emma to ice skate at Rockefeller Center, took her to Broadway shows, and spent countless hours reading together in the library he had converted into their family room. The penthouse, once sterile and silent, now echoed, with laughter, music from Emma's piano lessons, and the comfortable chaos of childhood. Jessica often stayed for dinner, becoming a bridge between Emma's past and future, helping her process memories of Sarah while embracing the security Richard provided. During their quiet evening conversations, Richard found himself opening up about his own childhood, his business struggles, and the emptiness he had felt during the years without knowing about Emma. Their peace was shattered on a grey February morning when Thomas Mitchell filed legal papers claiming custody of Emma. His petition painted Richard as an emotionally unstable workaholic who had abandoned his parental responsibilities and was now attempting to claim his daughter only out of guilt and financial obligation. Thomas presented carefully curated evidence, old photographs of Richard at business events looking stern and unapproachable, testimonials from former employees describing his demanding nature and explosive temper during stressful negotiations, and manipulated excerpts from Sarah's early journal entries expressing fear about Richard's dangerous business associations. The custody battle consumed the next 6 months of their lives. Richard hired the best family law attorneys money could buy, but Thomas had prepared his case carefully, presenting himself as a loving uncle who had provided emotional support during Sarah's final months, and who could offer Emma a stable, traditional family environment with his wife and teenage children in Oregon. Thomas's legal team painted a picture of Richard as a man whose wealth and power had been built on questionable business practices, suggesting that Sarah had fled not from external threats, but from Richard himself. They presented testimony from former business rivals who described Richard as ruthless and vindictive, willing to destroy anyone who crossed him. During depositions, Thomas appeared sympathetic and concerned, describing how Sarah had confided her fears about Richard's volatile temper and demanding nature. He claimed that Emma needed stability and normalcy, not the artificial luxury of a guilty father trying to buy his way into her affections. The proceedings were brutal for Richard, forcing him to defend not only his fitness as a parent, but his entire character and business practices. Emma, caught in the middle, was required to meet with court-appointed psychologists and social workers, her young life scrutinized and analyzed by strangers trying to determine her best interests. During this period, Emma's anxiety intensified dramatically. She began having nightmares, struggled with concentration at school, and developed a nervous habit of checking locks and looking over her shoulder. She lost weight, frequently complained of stomach aches, and clung to Richard with desperate intensity whenever they were separated, even briefly. Richard and Jessica worked together to provide emotional support, arranging for additional therapy sessions and trying to maintain as much normalcy as possible despite the legal chaos surrounding them. However, they sensed that something deeper was troubling Emma beyond the obvious stress of the custody proceedings. Jessica noticed that Emma's anxiety spiked whenever anyone mentioned the period immediately before her mother's passing. During art therapy sessions, Emma drew disturbing pictures of storms and broken papers, images that seemed to carry significance beyond their apparent randomness. The breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon in April, almost exactly 6 months after Emma had first appeared at Richard's door. As thunder rumbled outside the penthouse windows, Emma suddenly began sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of her secret finally becoming too much to bear alone. "I saw something," she whispered through her tears, clinging to Richard with desperate intensity. "The day Mommy went to heaven, I saw something that I never told anyone because I was scared it would make everything worse." With infinite patience and gentleness, Richard and Jessica helped Emma reveal the truth she had been carrying. On the morning of the accident, she had witnessed her mother on the phone, arguing with someone in hushed, frightened tones. Emma had been playing in her bedroom when raised voices drew her to the doorway, where she could see her mother pacing frantically in the living room. She was crying and saying things like, "I won't sign those papers and you can't threaten me anymore," Emma whispered. After she hung up, she ripped up a letter and threw the pieces in the trash, saying words that scared me. "I won't let you hurt my daughter to get to her father." The pieces of that torn letter, which Emma had secretly retrieved and hidden in her backpack, would prove to be the key that unlocked everything. She had carried them for months, too frightened to reveal their existence, because she feared the contents might somehow hurt Richard or force her to leave him. When reconstructed by forensic experts, the letter revealed Thomas Mitchell's true nature. He had been systematically blackmailing Sarah, threatening to reveal Emma's location to unnamed dangerous people, unless she agreed to sign custody documents naming him as Emma's guardian in case of emergency. The letter exposed Thomas's elaborate manipulation, his exploitation of Sarah's illness and isolation, and his calculated plan to gain control over Emma as a means of eventually accessing Richard's wealth. He had researched Richard's business empire extensively and convinced himself that gaining custody of Richard's daughter would provide him with leverage for financial gain, either through direct inheritance claims or through manipulation of Richard's protective instincts. Sarah had been preparing to contact Richard directly when the accident occurred, finally ready to risk everything rather than submit to Thomas's escalating demands. Her final act had been to destroy Thomas's threats, but Emma's innocent act of preserving the evidence had ultimately provided the key to their salvation. Armed with this evidence, Richard's legal team dismantled Thomas's custody claim in a single day of courtroom proceedings. The judge, horrified by the revelation of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation, not only denied Thomas's petition, but issued a restraining order preventing him from any future contact with Emma. Thomas was also referred for investigation of elder abuse and fraud charges related to his treatment of Sarah during her illness. The victory in court marked the beginning of their true healing as a family. Richard officially adopted Emma, giving her his surname and ensuring that their bond could never be legally challenged again. The adoption ceremony, held in the judge's chambers with Jessica as their witness, was simple but profound, marking the legal recognition of what had already become an unbreakable emotional reality. Jessica, who had provided such crucial support during their darkest months, gradually transitioned from nanny to family friend to something much more meaningful in Richard's life. Their relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on their shared love for Emma and their mutual respect for Sarah's memory. Emma, played matchmaker with the subtle persistence of a child who recognized that Jessica's presence made their family complete. 2 years later, Richard made a decision that would honor Sarah's memory while creating a lasting legacy for Emma's future. Using a significant portion of his wealth, he established the Sarah Mitchell Children's Hospital, a state-of-the-art pediatric facility that provided free medical care to underprivileged children throughout the New York metropolitan area. The hospital became Richard's new passion project, allowing him to channel his business acumen towards something meaningful while teaching Emma about service and compassion. She often accompanied him to the hospital, where she would read to younger patients and help distribute toys and games to children undergoing treatment. Emma, now 9 years old and thriving in every way, stood beside her father at the hospital's dedication ceremony, her small hand confidently grasping the ceremonial scissors as they cut the ribbon together. In her brief speech, she spoke with the poise and wisdom of someone who had learned that love could triumph over fear, that families could be born from the ashes of loss, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came disguised as the deepest challenges. "My mommy always told me, that love makes people stronger," Emma said into the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "She loved my daddy enough to keep him safe, and now he loves me enough to help other children feel safe too. I think she would be proud of what we built together." Jessica stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched the two people who had become her whole world honor the memory of the woman who had made their family possible. 6 months later, in a quiet ceremony, attended only by Emma and Margaret Mitchell, who had traveled from Portland despite her failing health, Richard and Jessica exchanged vows, promising to build their future on the foundation of love and sacrifice that Sarah had established. 5 years after that stormy November night, Richard and Emma established a new tradition. Every year on the anniversary of her arrival, they would stand together at the same windows where he had first seen the rain beating against the glass, watching whatever weather the November sky offered, and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to that moment. Emma, now 12 and preparing for the challenges and opportunities of adolescence, carried within her the love of two mothers, the one who had sacrificed everything to protect her, and the one who had chosen to love her as if she were her own biological daughter. Jessica had become not a replacement for Sarah's memory, but a bridge between past and future, helping Emma honor her mother's legacy while embracing the family they had created together. The penthouse now displayed a gallery of family photographs documenting their journey. Emma's first day of school with Richard beaming proudly beside her, family vacations to places Sarah had dreamed of visiting, quiet moments of everyday happiness that had accumulated into a lifetime of shared love. Sarah's portrait hung in a place of honor in the living room, surrounded by Emma's artwork and achievement certificates, a constant reminder of the love that had made everything possible. Richard, completely transformed from the isolated businessman he had once been, understood now that true success had nothing to do with financial achievement or professional recognition. It lived in the daily moments of connection, homework sessions at the kitchen table, goodnight kisses that chased away bad dreams, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing that someone loved you unconditionally and would never willingly let you face the world alone. As father and daughter watched the city lights twinkle below them on that anniversary evening, Emma leaned against Richard's shoulder with the easy affection of a child who had never known a moment's doubt about her place in the world. "Thank you for keeping your promise, Daddy," she whispered. "What promise, sweetheart?" "You promised to make everything better. And you did." Richard smiled, understanding that the real miracle hadn't been finding his daughter on that stormy night, but discovering that love could heal every wound, bridge every gap, and transform even the most broken heart into something capable of infinite tenderness and joy.